What up, y'all? It is Sunday morning. The second round of the playoffs is going to, for the most part, starting today, except the game 7 with the Houston. I'm tripping with the Clippers and the Jazz. They play later today, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the second round predictions now, and we'll go from there. And I'm gonna go ahead and give you the second round prediction for the Golden State and whoever gets in the second round because it's pretty easy. And then I'll go through each second round matchup and then we'll go from there. And I'm still gonna, and I have, as always, I have thoughts about my Bulls. So I'm gonna try to make this as quick as I can. No cool graphic today because I'm trying to get this up as soon as I can before the playoffs start, and doing the cool graphics and stuff takes more time than I actually have. So, okay. Whoever comes out of that Clippers, and Jazz, it's still going to end up the same. The matchups may be different, but Golden State's still going to win. Now, it isn't going to be a sweep like Portland. I honestly thought Portland was going to get one game in, but I guess no. Lillard and McCollum weren't good enough to get one game in. If it's Utah, I think it'll be 5, but I think it'll be more exciting. If it's the Clippers, which I really don't think it's going to be the Clippers, then I think their veteran presence is going to give you enough for one extra win. Okay, so the Houston and Spurs. This is actually going to be really fun, I think. The Spurs can run. They would actually prefer to run. And we already know Houston, that high-octane offense is going to be entertaining. I still think that defense ends up winning this, just like I gave OKC a fighter's chance because they had the MVP and they can defend a little bit. I just don't trust Houston long term. Like, I think they're fun to watch and they do what they do and they run their system, but they don't really defend well. They defend better. Mike D'Antoni's system has always not really been known for defense. They've actually defended better. The system has actually defended better in Houston, and that's partially because of Patrick Beverley. Usually D'Antoni doesn't have he doesn't stress defense like that, and he doesn't have a lot of defensive specialists. But with Beverley can't shoot the 3, but he's a defensive specialist, and it's actually helped them, I think. I do not think, though, that's going to be enough to beat the Spurs, because I think the Spurs are a better team, but I do think it's going to end up being real close. It might end up being a 6 or 7 game series, but I think Houston's going to their ride in the playoffs is going to end, and San Antonio got this in 6 or 7 games. I'm thinking 7, but it might end up being 6. All right, now to the East. So here's what it's going to be. It's whoever comes out facing the Golden State Warriors. Golden State has that series, and then San Antonio has their second round series against Houston. That's going to be tougher than. That's going to be a tough series. It's going to be 6 or 7 games. And on to the East. All right, this is how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go to the. I'm gonna save my Bulls thought for last. I'm gonna just do the matchups. Boston and Washington. Rondo gave Boston fits in that Chicago series. I understand Boston. I like Brad Stevens. He's a better coach than I gave him credit for when he got here in the league, but he's a really good coach, and his adjustments won that series. In addition to the matchup of him and Fred Hoiberg was no contest, but I'm gonna go on the Bulls in a second. That being said, Isaiah Thomas is 5'9", man. Period. Like he he shouldn't be as dominant as he is. I respect the brother immensely, but he's 5'9". Okay, so it's Boston. It's him and a bunch of dudes basically. Washington got this series. If they don't win this series, something happened. Okay, Washington is probably going to get this series. I'm not going to say 5. I'm not going to say a sweep. But I think in 6 games, Washington with Wall and Bill and Gortat that's a better team than Boston, period. So they're I'm not going to sit up and call them the worst number 1 seed in history because I don't believe that at all. But Isaiah Thomas is 5'9", and you only have one person, and it's basically just them and a bunch of other. It's basically just him and a bunch of dudes, and that really hasn't emerged as a second scorer throughout the season. There really hasn't emerged as a second scorer in the playoffs. There have been guys that have stepped up. Bradley has stepped up. Gerald Green has stepped up. You know, Horford has his moments, but it's really just you only have to key on Isaiah Thomas, and that's it. And really, he gets most of his money on pick and roll anyway. So how you beat him is you let Olynyk score 30, you let Horford drop whatever, because because really if Olynyk, because they run a lot of pick and roll. What it is when you do when you do a pick and roll, when the forward comes up and does a pick and roll, and that basically frees up Isaiah Thomas. You don't follow, because basically how the pick and roll is you pick the player, the guard goes around, you chase the roller. Guard goes around, you chase the roller. What you do is, because I would rather have Horford and Olynyk try to beat me than let Isaiah Thomas go free. What you do is you bounce off the picker and you still chase the guard, because basically the way a lot of teams run that pick and roll is for the guard. They don't really run it for the person picking them for the forward, because usually it's the forward, or just in some cases high pick and roll. The guard, the center, will set that pick for you. They don't roll it. They don't set it up for the post player. They set it up for the guard. All you got to do is bounce off the roller and guard the ball, which is Isaiah Thomas. So you can just break that play. I would let the others, as Shaq calls them, I would let the others beat Boston. I'll let the others beat you. I'm not trusting Isaiah Thomas. I'm not letting Isaiah Thomas go off for 30. I'm not. I refuse to let him go off for 30. And with the guard play at Washington, I think that if you put pressure on Isaiah Thomas and you chase him and I'm letting Gerald Green try to bust for 30. So I don't think he can do it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm letting that happen, right? So I think if Washington was smart, I think they got this series. Toronto and Cleveland. Cleveland basically sweeping Indiana. That wasn't a surprise. I told y'all it would be a sweep. I had no faith in the Pacers at all. It's gonna get worse because Bird is stepping down. And if I'm the Lakers, and if I'm the Lakers, I'm not trading for Paul George. If I'm Boston, you talk to Indiana and you see if you can get Paul George. Because if I'm Boston, they need a second scorer to help Isaiah Thomas. If I'm the Lakers, you get Alonzo Ball and you do what you do. I ain't touching Paul George with a 10-foot pole if I'm the Lakers. I don't know if Magic's gonna hear this, but you build that team around young superstars, and you may get a couple veterans, but you don't mess up your core or a draft pick for Paul George. I'm sorry, you couldn't do anything in that series at all, and it was competitive throughout the series, but you couldn't get a game in. Okay. And then Toronto, with the Toronto and Milwaukee series. Milwaukee, they weren't healthy. Jabari Parker wasn't healthy. Chris Middleton had an injury, and they still gave Toronto all they can in 6 games. Milwaukee's gonna be fine. They need to be healthy. If you can get us another scorer, maybe a bench guy, that'll be awesome. But Toronto and Cleveland, Cleveland in 6, because I think Toronto is talented enough to at least get a couple games in. DeRozan plays consistently. Kyle Lowry, I don't want to say takes games off, but it seemed like in the Milwaukee games in the games with Milwaukee that they lost, Lowry either wasn't effective or it didn't seem all there. So although I think they're talented enough, they're more talented than Indiana to get a couple games, I don't think this will be. LeBron James is still the best player in the league, and he did crazy stuff in the Pacers series to win games. I have no doubt in my mind he's going to do that again. So Toronto is going to lose that series in 6 games. So in the Eastern Conference Finals, I have the Washington Wizards and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And in the Western Conference Finals, I have Golden State and the Spurs. So there you go. Real quick, I had to talk about my Bulls, and I'm sorry if I'm a Bulls fan, and it is what it is, man. Everybody in that organization needs to be fired, period, except the Reinsdorfs. And if I'm Michael Reinsdorf, because he's running the day-to-day operations of the Bulls, I have to be like, okay, this is what I have to do. Or you have to decide what you want to be, because I watched that game the other day, and you lost by 32 points. If I'm D Wade, I retire, because you can't do anything. You're only good in spots. If you do, and I understand, you're from Chicago. I understand your people are there. I understand your kid is in school. Your boys are in school. I get that, man. But and you got the option. So if you stay, you stay. You don't, you don't. I will go ahead and retire. Or I would not be surprised, quite honestly, if he either goes to Milwaukee, because that's right there. You go to Indiana, because that's right there, for that a year, or see what happens, or just retire. Or if you stay, see, this is what the whole competitive thing, because local media in Chicago, and this has been, if you've paid attention to beat writers, if you pay attention to sports radio guys, the idea in Chicago is to be competitive. Well, that's what being competitive is. That's what, I'm going to get veterans, and I'm going to get veterans, and I'm going to half-ass build, not sorted through the draft, and there's a dumb philosophy about the draft and how you build, because you don't draft athletes. You luck up if you draft an athlete. You luck up like they lucked up with Derrick Rose. You're drafting very awkward, high character, uh, turned out to be specialists, but because of the situation, you they were able to grow into a functional two-way player in Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was a specialist. Jimmy Butler wasn't a scorer. Jimmy Butler was a defensive specialist. That's the only reason he's in the league right now. Or that's the only reason he got in the league is because he was a specialist. On a bad situation, just like Isaiah Thomas in Boston. Isaiah Thomas got to Boston, and he, by default, because he can get to the rim, he became their number one option. Jimmy Butler, based on injury, because of injury, and because of, like, they didn't really have anybody else but Derrick Rose, honestly, he was able to develop an offensive game, and he had an opportunity because he can defend, and he was under Tibbs. He stayed out there, and he got a chance to develop an offensive game, which still isn't fluid, which still is very difficult to watch. And it's still inconsistent because there are games where he drops 30, there are games where he drops 40, and then there are games where he struggles to do anything. And you'll be lucky if you get 10 from, not 10, I'm not going to give him that, but you'll be lucky if you get 20 from him. And and in some cases, he's a volume shooter. And it's like, no. They should have traded Jimmy Butler last summer when Boston and Minnesota was trying to get him. And now you just added a bunch of miles on his knees. He has a back issue now. So now you might not be able to trade for him. And they just had a very tough series against Boston. They had a very chippy series against Boston. So you might not be able to trade Jimmy Butler. D Wade, it's his option. You really can't do anything there. If I'm him, I'm retiring, or you go somewhere else. You go to Indiana's close to Chicago, Milwaukee's close to Chicago. Those are the two places. If I was him and I wanted to play, I would go. But it's his option. He'll probably stay. Rondo is the realest dude on that team. Period. That's the one dude I would keep. I like Portis's energy. Everybody else, go. Burn it down. Burn it down. Honestly. And Fred Hoiberg needs to be fired. That experiment is over. And John Paxson needs to be fired. That experiment is over. And the Bulls need to figure out what they want to do. Because this being competitive thing, Bulls fans, this is what you're gonna get. Period. Like we gotta hope that somebody wants to come here. We gotta hope that they politic for Carmelo Anthony to come here or something. And you hope that, and what it's gonna look like is, on paper, it's gonna look really awesome because there's question marks with the rest of the East. We know that we only really know of one, maybe two teams in the East that are going to be perennial, okay? Are going to be perennial dominant teams, and that's Cleveland, and quite honestly, it's Toronto. And Toronto isn't necessarily a dominant team, but they'll always be a top seed in the playoffs. So it'll be Cleveland, Toronto, either 2 or 3, and then randomness everywhere else. Like Washington, if Wall and Bill figured it out, and Scott Brooks is actually doing a better job coaching there than he did in OKC. So you have, and then with Milwaukee's young and up and coming, but I can't call them perennial because of injury and youth. There were seasons where I thought they were going to do something, and then they didn't make the playoffs. Or I thought they were going to be this breakout team, and they they kind of were, but they weren't because they finished sixth. So we really don't know. So on paper, if they get a free agent, if the Bulls get a free agent, what's going to end up happening is everybody's going to be like, the Bulls got a free agent. And then on paper, because you really don't know how the East is going to go, on paper, I had them being the second best team in the East on paper. And then injuries happened, and then Fred's ineptness, and then them running two different styles of offense. They barely made the playoffs. It would have been better if they missed the playoffs just to get a young draft pick. But then I don't know if I can trust their scouting because Cameron Payne didn't dress. Valentine is like, Nico might be gone. And quite honestly, I want Nico to leave because I think he needs to go somewhere else. I would love to see him in a Mavericks uniform, to be honest. Dirk's still going to be there for a year. And if I'm Cuban, I'd get Nico because he has a similar skill set. And I think Dirk can teach him some stuff. So I actually want Nico to go somewhere else because the confidence level as an organization is not there in him. And he needs to be somewhere where someone believes in him. But that team needs to be burnt down because this whole philosophy about we're going to draft character guys, we're going to draft high character guys from specific schools. We're going to, be competitive and we're not going to be bad. You know what I'm saying? And there's a difference between tanking for the sake of tanking and then being bad just because. I understand, even though sometimes I don't agree with it, I understand the whole Mark Cuban philosophy, and I can't believe I'm saying it, where we're not going to tank for the sake of tanking, but they got a lot of young guys, and they're going to have a draft pick. They got a lot of young guys around them. They figured out, they find guys, they use their D-League system very well. They're one of the few teams that do this very well. And even though they didn't tank for the sake of tanking and they were in the playoffs, and even though I did a whole thing about that, because I actually agree with what Philly tried to do, it's just Sam Presti wasn't really there to see it because people were tired of losing. But they have a very young, strong team, up-and-coming team. When Ben Simmons come back and everybody is healthy, Philly is going to be a thing. But I understand Cuban's philosophy about not tanking for the sake of tanking, but they had a bunch of young guys and they were injury prone, so the Mavericks are going to be fine. The Bulls, by them getting stars and veterans and that philosophy of we're going to draft certain guys and we're going to draft certain guys from certain schools, it's not helping you because you don't know how to scout well. And you draft, and you trade poorly. Cameron Payne couldn't dress. You know what I mean? Come on, man. Tear that down. Paxson needs to go. Foreman needs to go. Fred needs to go because Fred Hoiberg, if you want to run an offense where it's similar to Golden State and it's motion and it's 3-pointers, or even if it's motion and it's not 3-pointers, if you want to run. But your squad doesn't respect you enough to run the offense. The only person that ended up respecting you, quite honestly, and he didn't really run your offense. He ran a version of your offense that suited him, was Rondo. So, tear it down. I would keep Rondo and everyone else go away. And we're kind of stuck with D. Wade and his decision because he is his option. And I'd still try to figure out a way to get rid of him if he decides to stay here, which I don't think he will because he's used to playing for championships every year. And I honestly don't think this is a championship caliber team. You barely made the playoffs. Anyway, this video is almost 25 minutes long. I'm out, man. Y'all are gonna see my wonderful face and my wonderful beard just because I don't have time to do pretty graphics. But yeah, that's my playoffs second round prediction and my Bulls rant at the end. Anyway, I'll holler at y'all later. I'm going to do a football vlog about the draft probably later today just because I want to do a research on some things. I feel a little bit better about what the Bears did. I still think the Trubisky situation was stupid but I have my reasons for that, and I want to get deep into that because people are not understanding why a lot of us think this is bad. But okay, I will holler at y'all later. Peace.